Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? So, like the rest of you, I woke up today and saw that there was a banned and restricted announcement. And I wasn't really planning on there really being anything in standard, so that was a little bit surprised. I realized I just said really twice. But, like, there was news. There was news, and it wasn't what I expected, to be honest. So, let's talk about it and see really what this means for standard and really also for another format going forward. Now, I want to say, I just saw the news when I woke up. Literally, I hopped in the shower, got on the computer so I could make a video for you. I haven't even read their explanations on each of these, but I'm going to give my initial responses, and then we'll read what Wizards actually said as to why. But here in Standard, they actually decided to ban Meathook Massacre, which I've thought Meathook was almost an overpower card from the beginning. Not even because it's a board sweeper or whatever, but because it does what it does every single turn, right? The life loss and the life gain. And it even creates scenarios where you can't even effectively block your opponent's stuff as you're trying to make a comeback, which is kind of wild, really, for the cost of the card. And it already was starting to show up in a lot of decks. Even decks I've built where I'm just like playing black as a tertiary color, sometimes I am looking to make room for something like Meathook. So that already says it's actually pretty powerful. And because it's an enchantment, you kind of have to go out of your way to try to get rid of it. Because though there is some enchantment removal, it's not often as flexible, though we are starting to see Destroy Evil played a little bit more and Tear Asunder. So maybe. Now, did they wait too long for it? Possibly, but it's still very effective in a lot of the decks that it's in now. And when you combine that with something like Liliana, then it's like, okay, well, you get to wipe the board, and the next best thing your opponent plays, you have an easy, repeatable answer to that card. So I think it actually makes a lot of sense. I would have liked to have seen other things, as this is the only thing in Standard that got put on there. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like mass ban a bunch of things and anything that's good. Nothing like that. I'm not that type of person. But I do think there are other things to consider, possibly, in a variety of couple decks. But I think this is a reasonable starting point, and it's a safe ban is the other thing. We're not banning new cards. We're not really worried about, like, it's not going to have an impact on them financially, because we have to admit that's something they have to think about. Like, you have your meat hooks or you don't at this point. Otherwise, yeah, this seems fine. I'm with it. I think it opens up the door for, honestly, more than anything, I think it opens up the door for those aggro starts a little bit more, even than aggro decks. Because a lot of times, you end up with just like 2 creatures out that have like 2 toughness or whatever, and then your opponent goes into turn 4, turn 5, just wipes out your couple of things, right? And then you're already behind for the rest of the game. So this does change that dynamic a little bit. But we'll see how it plays out. Now, additionally, they did ban Jorian in Modern. And this is one of those things. I haven't played much Modern lately, but I have kept up with it somewhat because I'm probably going to go to my local stores and play a little bit over the next few months. And Jorian was becoming quite the deck that was played a lot. And we even saw it if you look at online results. It was very popular. And an interesting thing is, it even got the nickname Money Pile at one point, because you're having to play more of the fetch lands and non-basics. Some of the more powerful spells from Modern Horizons made their way into the deck. So there's a lot of different things that were making this deck very expensive. Plus, one of the things players were complaining about is you saw a lot of shuffling, a lot of draws, you know, rounds going to time, or maybe the person wins game 1 and then there's not enough time to play games 2 and 3. So a lot of that stuff was happening because of this deck, because they tend to be slower, control-y type decks on top of requiring a lot of like shuffling and, you know, manipulation or whatever. So I kind of get it. I'm not opposed to that. I think we've done bannings in the past when things have slowed down the pace of play too much. I think this is a combination of not just slowing the pace of play, but the actual card itself, leading to decks that are both slow and long and drawn out, especially for a lot of people that aren't playing a lot coming out of the pandemic, and very expensive. I mean, this is kind of crazy to think about, but by banning Jorian and those decks going away, the average price of a modern deck probably comes down like $200, which is wild. But yeah, I haven't done the hard math on that, so I'm sure somebody's going to quote me and say, oh, it's only $120 or whatever. But regardless, the average price of the modern decks are going to come down. But anyway, let's hop in and say, what did Wizards say about all this? Because I have no clue. So they're saying in Standard, as often as the case, standard card pool, rotations, blah, blah. All right, well, they're okay. To provide a small push against the... Okay, they're talking about black being powerful and a push against the color black's play rate among competitive decks. They're choosing to ban 1 black card. Okay, that's fair. I mean, they're not wrong. Black, I mean, I was recording a video for y'all, which y'all are probably going to see later this afternoon, that I just conceded a bunch of games just because I didn't, like, I literally played against, God, I think at the final count was 7 decks in a row that were either black or predominantly black, like splashing red or something. And it was like the same cards over and over. And that doesn't make for a good video. So I just would rather just concede those games. Literally, if I saw somebody play 2 swamps and then either like the evolving 1/1 or they played underdog, I just went ahead and conceded because I already know what the rest of the deck looks like, and it just doesn't, even if I thought I could win, it doesn't make for a good video. So yeah, glad to see that they did at least acknowledge that, and that's cool. Ultimately, they decided to ban Meathook Massacre was the best choice, as it's one of the most powerful black cards in the format. It's especially powerful against archetypes relying on small creatures. And with Brothers War on the horizon, we anticipate the new cards entering the format to provide tools for other decks and other combinations. In the meantime, we expect this shakeup. Okay, so that is interesting because they know stuff we don't when making this, right? So you're going to be looking at stuff from the Brothers War possibly coming in and making an impact for the other colors and possibly even targeting certain cards, I would imagine. They can't say that, I wouldn't imagine, in this. So kind of cool that they're at least looking forward. Hopefully they're right. I mean, well, we'll talk about this in a closer. But moving on to Modern, they've been healthy since their last banned and restricted update, which is mostly true, I think. Jorian most commonly appears as a companion in 4-color Omnath decks. That's true. While the fixable dexterity issue exists, to a lesser degree in other formats like Pioneer and Modern. Okay, so they're leaning on the dexterity part of this. Basically, all the fetch lands, card selection spells, you know, that whole thing. Finally, I've heard from many players that the repeated triggers caused by Jorian and many other cards surrounding it can lead to repetitive gameplay patterns in long games with lots of downtime in between other players' actions. That is true. There's a lot of cards where, like, you draw, you have to decide if you want to scry, you know, whatever. Maybe they fetch, okay, that takes time. So I could see how just a bad play experience is what they're trying to do with. Pioneer, they say so far it looks good. Though, to be honest, I'm a fan of mono green in Pioneer, and I think the deck might be slightly too good. I would not have been surprised if something ended up there, even if it was just Nykthos, to be honest. Legacy, the metagame looks healthy. They did ban Ragavan a while back, and that seems to have helped. And Vintage. You know, I don't know. Let's talk about a couple things, though, here. First is that I think there would have been possibility to do some stuff for Explorer. You know, I think right now, while you're waiting on some of the other decks to come online and some of the other cards to get printed, I would say something like Greasefang could have been on the list because it really does. Now, admittedly, you can deal with Greasefang, but when you don't, like, it just really puts a lot of pressure on the format. So, and I don't know, maybe it's not Greasefang, maybe it's the other, you get rid of, Greasefang's fine and it's neat to build around, so maybe you get rid of some of the vehicles, I don't know. But I think there's stuff like that that could have been addressed. Beyond that, one of the things that's always hard to figure out when they make these decisions is they do have information on upcoming sets. And that could help determine what they think needs to be banned or not when another set's coming in like a month. The other thing that's always interesting too, and I experienced this when I was working at Wizards and having conversations with people, is that there's always things that are intended or thought about, and even the playtest groups discover or don't discover that are different than we'll call the general civilian hive mind, right? Comes on board and discovers or goes down a path. And one of the ways I think that happens, I don't think people think about, is that if you have, even if it's a group of 50 or 100 or whatever that you have playtesting, if 2 or 3 decks early on become dominant, well, then those are going to get attention, and people are either saying, okay, can we build these decks to deal with those or not, or certain sideboard cards need to exist or whatever. And then when you get to the, you know, millions of players playing, then the outcomes look different, right? Because even as a group, we go down different paths, and even more so with Arena and the information sharing of all these different websites. So it's always interesting to see what ends up on the ban and restricted list. But anyway, I don't really have a problem with this. I think the list is fine. I think these 2 cards are reasonable to remove. Are there other things in other formats I would have addressed? Probably, but I'm not totally as well versed in those to say that they should have, to be honest. I'll leave that to somebody else who plays those formats regularly. But I do look forward to seeing what it's going to look like over the next few months, especially with Meathook gone. But y'all let me know in the comments, because I don't really know. I'm curious. And yeah, while you're at it, watch one of my other videos, because I have a lot of good stuff here. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.